Good evening, everybody. I'm going to press continue here. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the District 3 Charter Commission Candidate Forum. This forum is sponsored by the Friends of Woodford's Corner and the following neighborhood associations: Back Cove Neighborhood Association, Deering Center Neighborhood Association, Deering Highlands Neighborhood Association, Mason's Corner Neighborhood Association, Stroudwater Neighborhood Association, and Woodford Oakdale Neighborhood Association. Thank you to all the committee members and to the candidates who are appearing with us tonight, as well as many people working behind the scenes to make this forum possible online. This event is being recorded and it's being broadcast live on the Friends of Woodford's Corner Facebook page. So you can watch it there. It'll also be posted, I think tomorrow, on their YouTube page. The Friends of Woodford's Corner YouTube page, that's tomorrow. The neighborhood associations will also be sharing the live stream on their Facebook pages and also sharing the YouTube video after the event. Now, only the candidates, the moderator, that's me, and the timekeeper are going to be recorded in this event. All of the viewers are muted. And while you can see small pictures up top of neighbors attending the forum on your screen, only the candidates, the moderator, and the timekeeper, the five of us in the bottom part of your screen, will actually be on the recording. The questions for this were developed in advance with input from the community and from committee members. There will not be any open questions from the public tonight. So again, my name is John Spritz. I live actually in District 4. And last week we had our candidate forum, and I'm happy to be moderating the District 3 one tonight. We have three people who are running for the District 3 seat on the Charter Commission, and they're in front of you right now: Brian Batson, Zack Barowitz, and Charlie Bryon. I'm going to take a moment or two, maybe a minute, and talk just a little bit about the Charter Commission, of which I know something because I sat on the last one about a decade ago. And just to let the people know who are watching this, there's been an enormous amount of media attention and also stuff in your mailbox and signs on lawns about the Charter Commission. And as you probably know by now, the Charter is essentially Portland's Constitution. It is the document that regulates and dictates how the city of Portland operates from a governance perspective. Now, the Charter Commission, which sat last about a decade ago and is meeting now, is going to be elected out of the people you see here and across the city. There will be ultimately 12 charter commissioners. 3 of those have already been selected by the city council, and 9 more are being elected just the way we normally elect city councilors. That is 5, 1 from each district, and 4 at large. So 5 plus 4 is 9, and then 3 already chosen, and that equals 12. And those 12 charter commissioners, once they're elected on June 8th, are going to start meeting. Probably one of the first things they'll do is elect somebody to be their chair and decide what the heck they're going to talk about for the next year or so. There is no particular time constraint to how long the Charter Commission sits. It could sit for as long as it wants to. Generally, they tend to sit for about a year, and they have a series of meetings over that time. And at the conclusion of their sitting, they issue a report out to City Council, which typically tends to approve it and pass it along to the voters. And you, the voters, then decide if you want to accept or not accept the recommendations of the Charter Commission. So what you're hearing tonight is the front end of a pretty long process that's probably going to be about 1.5 years, 2 years until its conclusion, just so you know. Much of it is going to be open to the public. Some of it is going to be, decision-making, not behind closed doors necessarily, but logistical and mechanical stuff. So that's how the Charter Commission operates. The way tonight operates is we have 3 candidates here for District 3, the District 3 seat on that Charter Commission. We're going to give them each 3 minutes in their first question to introduce themselves and explain why they're running for the District 3 seat. And then we'll have a series of questions. And for each question, they'll have 2 minutes to answer. And for each of those questions, whether it's 3 or 2 minutes, at the 30-second mark, Myelina, who is here, is going to hold up a yellow piece of paper that says, guys, you only have 30 seconds left. And then when they have hit the 2 or 3 minute mark, she's going to hold up that red piece of paper that says, you're done. If you're halfway through a sentence, I'll let you conclude it, but that's about it. We have a lot of people a lot of questions to get through and a lot of issues here. And we'll go in sequence throughout the evening. That is, we'll start with person A, then B, then C. The next question will go B, C, A, and the next question will go to C, A, B, and we'll sort of move it sequentially like that so that nobody ever has every third time people will be answering first. And then at the very end, we'll have opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement from everybody. I trust all the candidates understand this, and you probably should unmute yourselves just in case. So we're going to start in rotating order with the first question, and we'll begin with Mr. Barowitz, that's Zack Barowitz, followed by Mr. Batson, that's Brian Batson, followed by Mr. Bryon, that's Charlie Bryon. I'll call them by their first names after this. We'll start with Mr. Barowitz. Mr. Barowitz, why are you running for a seat on the Charter Commission? Go.
Well, thank you, John. And thanks to my fellow neighborhood associations. I know it's no small feat to put something like this together, so I appreciate it. People that know me in town might know me as a columnist, but really they know me as a community advocate. And I spent a lot of time looking at this charter, but my approach is really coming from a place of from being a community advocate. And what I've come to understand is that we get a lot of questions on sort of policy. How do we feel about the police chief being hired by the mayor? But what I'm not getting questions of, and what we should be talking about, is what goals are we trying to achieve? What's the whole picture? And not in terms of these sort of win-lose issues. And the goal, as I see it, is how do we achieve a structure of government that yields the best possible outcomes? And within that, there's sort of two objectives. On one hand, we want to have a robust representative democracy. On the other, an efficiently run city, often associated with the city manager. The problem is the two of these don't always go together. And that's when we get these ideological splits, not everywhere, but in some circles. And if you're not aware of them, you can consider yourself lucky. But looking into the challenge is to find a place where we can get these paths to sort of head towards this goal. And so we have a framework of principles or a foundation where we can then start evaluating, should counselors be able to speak to the Department of DPW, rather than just be who thinks this, who thinks that, who's not sure, let's argue the next one and the next one ad infinitum for a year or however long. So looking forward, I don't see either the manager role or the mayor role going away anytime soon. I think we're still going to need a manager or a city administrator, as I prefer to call it, to take care of make sure the payroll is met and the reporting is done properly and the contracts are being executed and the legal compliance, but that the policy directions and the political decisions are being made by our elected officials. And that's how we'll get the best results. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you very much. Mr. Batson, why are you running for a seat on the Charter Commission?
Well, I'll start off by thanking everyone for being here. And John, I appreciate your explanation of the charter and your service on the previous charter. Anyone running this year knows, anyone who has run for public office knows that it's not an easy thing to do. So I appreciate those who are brave enough to do it. So I am running because I believe I would be a valuable voice in the commission. I have the ability to provide firsthand context to my experiences as a counselor working with the charter. I see tremendous value in the fact that I have recent experience in City Hall and can speak to the culture and inner workings of that building. I have a proven track record of open-mindedness, listening to different perspectives, taking them seriously, and navigating very challenging discussions. I can work with an ideologically diverse group of folks with curiosity and respect and get things done. I know generally the directions I see us going or I would like to go, but for me, the path getting there is unknown. This is going to be a process. There's really no other way to put it. My opinion, this is not a referendum on ideas. I'm the first to admit that I don't have all the answers. And if I had my mind made up on everything, I feel very strongly that defeats the purpose of an open, inclusive, and robust public discussion, which is what I think we all want out of this. And inherently, it would stifle any voices that have yet to be heard. And there's a lot of people who are still learning about what this process is going to be. So I want to hear from everybody, not just the small group of the loudest voices in the room. That's something I took very seriously as your counselor, and I will carry over as your commissioner if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bryan, why are you running for a seat on the Charter Commission?
Thanks, John, and thanks to everyone on the call for taking time out this evening. Thank you to the associations. So I've been in Portland since 2007. It's a great city. It's a destination city. I love living here. I feel fortunate to be able to live here. I raised 2 children here. I've owned a business here, a restaurant down on Commercial Street, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations around the city, Gulf of Maine Research Institute and Sustainable Fishing. I've worked with Preble Street. I've worked with Share Our Strength and the Center for Grieving Children. And it's been an amazing experience. When the Charter Commission was voted into existence this last fall, I decided to run because I love the city and because I felt like I could work with some very bright, creative people to find some solutions that would make our city more efficient and more effective. Having read through the charter, I think that there are a lot of things that can be improved on. I think there's a lot of language that can be improved on. I'm not looking to do any policy changes. I think that's best left to legislators. I think really the job of the Charter Commission should be to review the charter, review the past Charter Commission, what their intent was, did we accomplish those things, and what can we do to make our current charter make our government more effective in the way that it works, and more collaborative, more cooperative, and more representative of everyone in Portland. So I think I can do that. I think it would be a fun, collaborative, exciting experience, and hope that I will have that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Our next question starts with Brian. Brian, what qualifies you particularly to help shape the future of our city?
Good question. Well, I touched on it a little bit in my opening statement. I'll set that aside for a moment. So what qualifies me? I mean, I think there's a lot of qualities that I think we should be looking for in these individuals. I mean, a little bit about myself. I've lived here a handful of years. I'm born and raised in Maine. I was a renter for a long time. I'm a homeowner. I have experienced the challenges that this city has faced. I've experienced all the amazing things that it has to offer as well. I really like to think that I have a lot of the qualities that are going to be important in these commissioners. My experience as a counselor, again, I think is really, really going to be beneficial as a voice on this group. I think over the past year, there's been a pretty significant call to arms, or a call to action, I guess you could say, for a lot of individuals to address, how our government has either been working or not been working so well for them. I think it's just really important that, we're all answering that call differently. And I think approaching it with curiosity, it's like the Walt Whitman quote that rings true is be curious, not judgmental. Being curious about all of these perspectives and, the people who are responding emotionally, listening to that, hearing where they're coming from, whether we agree with it or disagree with it, and really just being open. And again, you know, I have a lot of ideas of low-hanging fruit that I think would make our city government function a lot better. But at the same time, I really want to emphasize the fact that I am not showing up with, I am firm on this, because I think this is going to be a process that is going to be fluid. It's going to require listening and empathizing and being curious and navigating some really challenging discussions, which I have a history of doing on the council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charlie, the question is for you now, which is what qualifies you to help shape the future of our city?
Sure, it is a really good question. So I have a background in operations and project management, and you know, I have raised 2 children here in Maine, or in Portland, and I have owned a business. So I have some empathy for parents and families. I have empathy for the different business owners that are out there. I think that my experience as a business owner certainly would come to bear. I love people. I was in the restaurant business. You don't get into the restaurant business unless you really, really like people, and I do. I love to listen to people. One of the best things about this whole experience, frankly, running for the Charter Commission has been the opportunity to walk around through the streets, the neighborhood, and talk to people and hear from them. And you know, very often we're of the same mind on some things and not on others. And it's exciting and it's interesting and it's a great way to learn. It's been great, especially after COVID, getting out of the house. And I'm hoping that if elected, I'll have that opportunity to continue to do that in District 3, talking to people, working with different neighborhood associations to find out what are some concerns that they have that we might be able to address in the charter, again, without making policy, but by restructuring or clarifying what's in there now.
Thank you. Zach, the question is for you now. What qualifies you to help shape the future of our city? And you're on mute, Zach.
Well, it's certainly important to come to this with an open mind, but it's also important to come with a set of principles and values in which to sort of set one's moral course. I see the charter as a holistic document, a forest, not just a lot of trees. What I would bring, about 15 years of community involvement, community advocacy, list them. I with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Levittown Neighborhood Association, Portland YIMBY, advocating for affordable housing, the Greater Portland Community Land Trust, trying to develop affordable housing, and it's a lot of experience on a lot of different boards. What I would suggest for the charter is that, you know, first, maybe even before electing a chair, or probably before electing a chair, is establish some collegiality. How would we set rules for ourselves? How would we establish trust? How would we establish a good faith process? I wouldn't mind if we spend the first month doing team building exercises. But as a committee member, having served on many, I bring a few things. One, an ability to take a long conversation, discursive, and distill it into its key points. I pride myself on, and I just noticed over time that I'm able to do that and help a committee. I'm also very careful about language. That I would make sure that nothing is ends up in the chart is sloppy or ambiguous. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to follow up on that now, and we'll start with you, Charlie, which is getting more granular here. List and describe 3 areas where you think the City of Portland Charter could use attention and revision.
Sure. So I guess the areas that I've thought of that I think could use attention are the language around the powers of the city manager and the mayor and the responsibilities that they have. I think that area really needs some clarification and cleaning up. I would like to have additional oversight put into that. I think that the mayor and the city manager could work more collaboratively on their budget. And I would also like to see something in there about clean elections, working on that. I'm not in favor of using taxpayer money to fund candidates. I think that there's a inherent flaw in that thinking, but I do think that we should have something in there that addresses how our elections are handled in regards to making sure that they're more evenly and distributed and accessible to people. And then I think the other thing that I would probably address is the process by which the city manager is reviewed. I think that's an area that I would like to get deeper into and explore.
Thank you. Zach, the question is for you now, which is list and describe, if you can, 3 areas where you think the City of Portland Charter could use attention and revision.
Well, generally speaking, it would be to enhance the representative democracy. Looking at the current charter, though, the manager roles and the mayor roles sort of jump out as having a few issues to resolve. The last charter commission, to my understanding, was fearful with some justification that an elected mayor would misadministrate, and actually made the manager role stronger than it had been. In so doing, there are some ambiguities in the language, a sort of a hole in the language as to whether the manager, whether counselors, it says the counselors cannot direct staff, and it says the manager can assign staff, but it doesn't actually say anything about the counselors speaking to staff. So that should be clarified. The role of the mayor is more of a titular role. I see aspects of a lobbyist in there. I see a facilitator. I see a consultant. I mainly see a city council speaker, which I think the city council needs a city council speaker, but it should be elected by the city council itself. The leader of a body should be elected by that body. Having a popularly elected city council speaker doesn't mean that they're going to have the support of the body that they're leading. So they may not have any support. So either we sort of get rid of the role of mayor, or just make it or go back to the old system.
Thank you. Brian, for you, list and describe 3 areas where you think the City of Portland's charter could use attention and revision.
Well, there's certainly more than 3 areas I would like to dive into, but in terms of just the few right off the bat, I mean, in my experience as a counselor, and this sort of ties, wow, it is really coming down right now. This sort of ties into the dynamic of City Hall and the role of the mayor and the city manager. And I feel like this is a stem of a lot of issues. And it is through no one's fault of their own, rather the powers that are currently invested in them by the current charter. And I think Zach touched on this, is access to city staff. I mean, with all due respect to those in City Hall right now, something that was a major hurdle for me as a counselor was, for example, you're interested in pursuing some sort of policy initiative, and you need information that requires access to city staff. City staff is already incredibly busy all of the time. So not only do you feel like, they do work for you, but you have to reach out to them somehow and get information from them when they're already occasionally, incredibly busy as it is. So in order to do that, and this is written in the current charter, and it's a streamlining issue, or it was designed to streamline, is you have to go through the city manager. So I would have to talk to the city manager, say, I would like this information. That means we need to go to this staff person and go from there. I viewed that as incredibly cumbersome, and I know there are individuals or folks in, wow, that went by fast, in Portland who have trust issues with the information that is given from staff. So I know like the legislature has OPLAs, which is essentially independent staff that can provide non-biased information. That's something worth talking about. I absolutely think we should be looking into campaign finance reform and having more transparency around PACs and campaign financing. Accountability for city staff, consistent reviews of staff, and just very quickly, universal resident voting is absolutely something that should be addressed in the charter and not necessarily from a policy perspective.
Thank
That
you.
needs to be talked about as well. Thank you.
Zach, you have the next question first. Tell us about your experience working on a challenging issue with a group of people with diverse perspectives.
At Doherty Field, where the West School is, or where the West School was, one of our neighbors, he'd moved back to Portland from being away, and he lived across the street. And he looked out at that empty sort of empty lot, and thought that it'd be a good place to put some housing, or sort of a village. So he went to this city government. They said, we actually can't put housing there, but thank you. We appreciate your input. Then 2 years later, we were at a meeting. Actually, Brian was there too. And city staff said, we can build 8 units of housing. We said, 8? Like, yeah, I can't really do more than 8. I said, okay. Then sometime later, I met with a developer on that site. He says, this is a beautiful site. This is amazing. I never didn't even know it was here. I grew up in Portland, lived in Portland my whole life. I said, how many units could you get there? I said, well, 50. I said, okay, that's more like it. What eventually went out to RFP, took a lot of work on the part of the council. And we worked, the neighborhood association worked very closely with the development teams and with the abutters who had this going up literally in their backyards. And even though they weren't crazy about having a large development in their backyard, they saw that it was for the greater good. And we ended up with 108 planned units of affordable low-income and workforce housing. I'm incredibly proud of our neighborhood association. For taking in, being open, and for accomplishing that.
Thank you. Brian, the same question for you. Tell us about your experience working on a challenging issue with a group of people with diverse perspectives.
I never hesitate to reference the most challenging issue I ever faced as a counselor, which was the relocation of the Homeless Services Center, which was an incredibly long process that the Health and Human Services Committee took on for, years, like a year and a half plus, just discussing this one topic. And it was incredibly challenging and also very rewarding in a lot of ways. But the sheer length of it, the amount of folks that I spoke to, hundreds, thousands, in person, on the phone, emails, in committee meetings, in council meetings, doing neighborhood walks at various sites. It was just an incredible undertaking of a very complex and challenging issue that really rang home for me as an emergency department nurse. That I was juggling my healthcare experience, what I was seeing daily in the acute psych units, just people seeking emergency care, what they were going through, talking to social service providers, while at the same time wearing my city council hat and trying to navigate this really arduous and just complex policy issue. So I've spoken to new counselors about it. I've spoken to residents nonstop, both as a counselor and in retirement. But ultimately, we landed on something through a very meticulous process. And yeah, that was it.
Great. Thank you very much. Charlie, the question for you. Tell us about your experience working on a challenging issue with a group of people with diverse perspectives.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier my work with Gulf of Maine Research Institute. One of the things that we were working on together was the sustainable fishing programs that they do. And what we wanted to do was reduce some of the way that fishing, some of our fisheries, reduce the number of fish being caught there, and try to focus on other fish that were basically considered, for lack of a better word, bait fish. Dogfish, for instance. And the fishermen obviously are very resistant to wanting to change their fishing habits, and what they're catching is their lifeblood and their income. Working with GMRI, working with local restaurants and fish purveyors, and with the local fishermen, we had discussions about how we could bring these underutilized fish to the market and try to create a market for them. It was very challenging because obviously you're talking, like I said, you're talking about people's livelihood. And it's very challenging as a restaurateur or a fish salesperson to be selling a product that there isn't a demand for. So you have to actually create a demand where there was none. And at the same time, you have to not even hope, you have to work to make sure that you're protecting those fishermen and those fisheries. So that was a really amazing experience. I enjoyed every part of it. I think we were pretty successful overall. And that led to additional changes in the way some of the fishing nets were being cast, developing new technologies. And all of that came from a dialogue between the fishermen and GMRI and the scientists and the restaurants that were involved to kind of figure out a solution that would kind of raise all sails. And that was probably one of the more difficult, but also one of the more rewarding experiences I've had.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Bryan. Would you like to see racial and economic equity better addressed in Portland's charter? And if yes, what specific ideas do you have to help make that happen?
The answer is absolutely yes. And I know I've been talking to a lot of folks just about the charter in general, and this has come up a lot. Some people feel as though that's leaning more towards policy. I do feel as though it belongs in the charter. I think it's something that is so important to address and codify that it does belong in our Constitution. I mean, primarily, out of the fact that I do think it can exist in there, but also there's a part of me that's fearful of if it becomes something that's implemented through policy, that future elected leaders could potentially reverse it. And I think it's important enough where it needs to be codified in our Constitution. So I know a lot of people are familiar with what the state legislature did. Our Representative Rachel Talbot Ross she sponsored a racial impact study. I think that's absolutely something to look into. I know another candidate, Marfine Chan, has mentioned a human rights commission, which I think would essentially sort of broadly encompass ways to address this. So I think those are a couple ways to look at it. But at the end of the day, I think it's something that through the charter process, we need to bring in folks who have experienced it, who are experts in the field, and figure out the best way to make it a piece of our Constitution, because it's imperative that we address it.
Thank you. Charlie, the question for you. Would you like to see racial and economic equity better addressed in Portland's charter? And if yes, what specific ideas do you have to help make that happen?
So I think that should be addressed in the charter, but I think it should be, and I think this is sort of a little bit of what Bryan was getting at. I think we have to be careful about what's policy and what's not. And I firmly believe that the charter should not create policy. I do think that we can review the charter and explore how our government is organized, the different branches, and look for places where we can create institutions within our system that do focus on developing and championing racial equity and economic equity in Portland. So I think for me, from my perspective, getting our like one idea I had was, the mayor could be involved with some kind of racial equity board, and I would love to see something like that happen, where the mayor is basically bringing information back and forth to city council. So I think there is a place for it. I think it's something that we need to explore, but I would defer to people who frankly are a lot more, I think a lot more experienced with implementing racial equity programs, and then look at ways that we can do the same in our charter that doesn't create policy, because I think policy needs to be fluid and it needs to change over time with the times that we're in. So.
Thank you. Zach, the question for you, would you like to see racial and economic equity better addressed in Portland's charter? And if yes, what specific ideas do you have to help make that happen?
Yes. All the work I do, it has an equity aspect to it. Advocating for more affordable housing necessarily points to equity. Safer sidewalks necessarily points to equity, that so that people can exist without having to own a car. But when it comes to the charter, we're looking for sort of a structural outline that can accomplish equity. The first thing I would look at is better representation. More council districts, for example, would give more people representation. If District 2 were divided into the West End and Parkside, that would give the people of Parkside a better voice. I'm also been considering something smaller than a council district, but larger than a neighborhood association, like a community chair, who could have a role in appointments to boards and committees. That could be a platform for leadership development, and would increase communication between elected officials and the community. This would be a sort of another layer of elected office. Racial impact statement, I think, is appropriate for the charter. The changes to the police review board, the racial equity steering committee, recommended for the removal of their police review board because it's so ineffectual. But I think it could be appropriate for the charter to allow them to receive complaints directly and to have a budget for investigations, programs, and what have you.
Thank you very much. We'll start our next question with Charlie. Portland has gone from a system with a mayor who is essentially ceremonial to a popularly elected position with limited powers, and some people advocate for a stronger role for the mayor. Do you agree or not, and why?
So I agree to an extent. I think that the elected mayor it's important that we have an elected mayor, because they're representing people, helping to create policy and providing oversight for the city manager. I would like to see that oversight enhanced. I'd like to see the language around the city managers and the city mayor's powers improved. I would like to see more oversight by the mayor of the city manager's budget, more involvement, and ultimately, I would like to see the mayor have some kind of control over staff as well within City Hall. I don't think that I want to take away powers from the city manager. I think it's really important that we have that experienced city manager running the day-to-day operations. I wouldn't want an elected official to necessarily be running the day-to-day operations of such a complex organization. There's no guarantee that they would be effective at it. So for me, I see some places in the charter where I think we could provide some improvements and increase the power of the mayor, but I think it needs to be within reason and it needs to have checks and balances.
Thank you. Zach, the question for you. Portland has gone from a mayor who is essentially ceremonial to a popularly elected position with limited powers, and some people advocate for a stronger role for the mayor. Do you agree or not, and why? You're on mute, Zach.
Thank you. I agree, and I like that you said stronger as opposed to the perhaps more ambiguous strong. I said already that the mayor should be independent of the city council. There should be a city council speaker that has sort of would have the mayor's role now. But it's also before we talk about a stronger mayor, I would like to see a stronger role of elected officials, the council and the mayor, and because these are so elected officials who should be setting the policy and making the political decisions. How strong a mayor we end up with is, is sort of a matter of checks and balances. If the mayor hires the city manager, there could be some council oversight in terms of removal or ratification or removal. We could stagger the term of the mayor and the city manager so that the manager's contract extends beyond the mayor's term of office to get some continuity. The mayor could, for example, have a larger role in assigning the lobbyists to Augusta. I would like to see that in the hands of our elected officials. So there's a million and one ways to accomplish it.
Okay, thank you. Brian, the question for you. Portland has gone from a mayor who is essentially ceremonial to a popularly elected position with limited powers. Some people advocate for a stronger role for the mayor. Do you agree or not, and why?
Well, I'll start off by saying I absolutely support the fact that we have this role for the mayor over a ceremonial role. We are the biggest city in the state. A lot of other towns and cities look to us. I mean, dear ago, like so goes Maine, so goes the rest of the country. I feel that's the case for Portland. So goes Portland. A lot of the time the state will follow. So we are setting the precedent on a lot of policies. And I do feel as though it's very important to have a mayor to be, that person who can address the rest of the city, who can call up the governor, who can, be the voice when they need to be. I think that's something that they're elected to do. In terms of increasing their powers, if that's the way we want to frame it, I do think I'm certainly open to the conversation. I think we should strengthen the mayor's role. It's a question of how far we want to go. And of course, in conjunction with that, we sort of have to look at the city manager's role because the two sort of ebb and flow and work off of one another. So I think some low-hanging fruit that we can look into right off the bat would be, and I think this was mentioned, strengthening the mayor's role around the budget process. I think that's a really, really low-hanging fruit that we can look at, like annual policy workshops, initiating public hearings, and showing up with their own publicly vetted budget that is, they've put the work in through working with neighborhoods and constituents to show up with that and then compare it to the city managers, because you can almost guarantee they're going to be different for different reasons. But it's important that the two exist synonymously or with one another. Perhaps giving them more control over committee assignments. That's also another avenue to look at. In terms of hiring and firing city staff, I think that's something we would need to look at very carefully because that's going the route of just a straight executive mayor. But ultimately, I think it's a conversation that we need to explore.
Thank you. Sort of the flip side of that question is, and this is for Zack to start with, how do you feel about the role of Portland city manager? Do you feel it could or should be changed? And if so, how and why?
It's funny that the strongest opinions I get at the door is of people and it's a minority, a small minority of people who want to keep the city manager strong. But I haven't heard anyone say they wanted to increase the power of the city manager, which could be done. I mean, we could go down to 3 councilors who could meet once bi-monthly. The history of city manager is pretty interesting. It was popularized by Richard Childs, who was the heir of the Bon Ami soap fortune. And he inherited his father's wealth, but also his marketing acumen. And he seized upon the city manager as a way to combat machine corruption. And in a very short amount of time, reformed city governments across the country. At that time, the city manager was usually an engineer. Later, they became a sort of someone with a public administration background, and now more recently, business background. But the city manager, I think I said this before, they should be the chief administrative officer, and they can still make recommendations, but they should be made on the basis of the best policy. Or they can make 2 recommendation options and say, this is the best policy, but it's expensive. This is the best bang for the buck. And let our elected officials decide. Really, I don't see the balance of power between the mayor and the manager so much as I see it as between the mayor and the council. These are elected officials, and these are the ones who should be making the key decisions.
Thank you. Brian, the question for you, how do you feel about the role of Portland city manager? Do you feel it could or should be changed, and if so, why?
Well, I absolutely feel as though those who are publicly elected and held accountable to the voters should be the ones making policy decisions. I think, and I mentioned, or I touched upon this earlier, inherently through our current charter right now, the city manager controls a lot of the flow of information within City Hall. And that's something that we can change right off the bat to empower city councilors, to empower the mayor through access to city staff. I think right off the bat, that's something that I can tell you from my experience working within City Hall would have changed the dynamic pretty significantly. In terms of, I certainly don't think we're looking at, I'd be looking into strengthening the position any. What I can tell you is I certainly have no interest in eliminating the position. Again, we're the biggest city in the state. I can tell you whether I agreed or disagreed with some of the things that our current city manager did or was doing, or the budgets that were proposed, what have you. The amount of hours that go into that job are relatively unfathomable. So for someone to propose eliminating that position and suggesting that we have an executive mayor who also runs the day-to-day of the city and hires and fires department heads and runs city staff, I mean, they're going to need superpowers to do that. It's just not realistic. So, I mean, it's absolutely imperative we keep that position. And I think really we just need to get back to the core of consistent reviewal processes. That's something that was, for a litany of reasons, we did not do when I was a counselor nearly as frequently as we should, holding our city staff accountable. And if for some reason, counselors who are elected by the people do not like what they're doing, then that's upon our elected officials to make decisions about that and either create a system where they can adjust what they're doing to fix the problem, or perhaps look for new city staff.
Thank you. Charlie, for you, how do you feel about the role of Portland city manager? Do you feel it could or should be changed? And if so, how and why?
I agree. I think that we need to have a city manager running the day-to-day operations. We need someone who's experienced, who understands business, who understands the workings of a complex organization, someone who is going to work as an executive, kind of running the city and making sure that the city is working to become a better place. It's already an amazing place. And I think since I moved here in 2007, I've seen massive improvements to the parks and all of the different things that are available to the residents that live here. So I think that we fundamentally need to have a city manager. I do think that the role of the manager could be enhanced with, I think, more attention in the charter, maybe that would explore how we could create more collaboration between the city manager and the mayor on things like the budget. I do think that policy should be coming from our legislators, not from the city manager. So to me, having the city manager, I wouldn't add power. I would certainly not do that, but I don't think that that we could do what we're doing now without the city manager.
Thank you. Our next question starts with you, Brian. Do you think the charter should implement publicly funded clean elections for the city of Portland? And that would include school board as well as city council elections. Why? Why not?
I do. I think that is it's absolutely something I am supportive of, and I'll just be the plug for everyone who forgot. It happened when I was a city councilor. This is the entire reason the charter is open. For those who aren't aware of this, it's because essentially a referendum was brought forward and a lot of complicated things happened, but ultimately we decided that we could not implement this policy without opening the charter in order to explore it. So it's the whole reason why we're here today. Thank you. But yes, I am absolutely supportive of that. I think in conjunction with that, we just need to address campaign financing in general. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we need to look at campaign finance reform, excuse me. We really need to have more transparency around PACs and various political groups. There's more than one of them floating around these parts, and getting access or having access to where their money comes from is essentially not there. And there's absolutely ways to hide this money. So I think if we're advocating for transparency, if we're advocating for a change in this, divisive political climate that we're in, we need to figure out where the money is coming from.
Thank you. Charlie, for you, do you think the charter should implement publicly funded clean elections for the city of Portland, including the school board and the city council elections? Why or why not?
I like the idea of clean elections. I mean, it makes sense. What I don't want to see is public taxpayer money being used to support candidates. I would like to explore other options in the charter that we could implement. I agree that we need to have more oversight of funding of campaigns and where that money is coming from, the source of that. And I'd like to look at ways that we can level the playing field without necessarily asking taxpayers to pay for someone's campaign that they may not fundamentally agree with. And that to me is sort of the crux of that argument.
Zach, for you, do you think the charter should implement publicly funded clean elections for the city of Portland, including school board and city council elections? Why or why not?
Yes, I do. I understand there's a cost to it. There's a cost for every function of city government. But just looking around this room, there's not a lot of diversity in our city government, or at least not enough. Once again, my goal is to enhance our representative democracy, and that means to get more voices and more people involved. It is very difficult to run for office. I told and it takes time, it takes resources. Publicly funded elections will allow more people of more diverse backgrounds to be able to participate and to be able to hold positions of power within our city. So that's why I support it.
Thank you. Charlie, this next question starts with you. Currently, after the school board votes to approve their budget, the budget must then be approved by the city council and then approved by the voters in a citywide election. What are your thoughts on this current school budget process, and would you like to see any changes? And if so, what would they be?
I actually, I like the system that we have. I like that it goes to city council for review. I think they're in a position to understand what the city's plans and policies are down the road. I think they can look at pipeline and understand how the school budget may affect future decisions. And then I think it's important that the voters obviously vote on it. So to me, I wouldn't change the process. I would love to explore some other options if people have, really great ideas, but I would not cut city council or voters out of that decision-making process.
Thank you. Zach, for you, currently after the school board votes to approve their budget, it must then be approved by city council and then approved by the voters in a citywide election. What are your thoughts on the current school budget process? Would you like to see any changes? And if so, what would they be?
Education. I used to think education was a really big issue for me because I've been a teacher. I have a background in class teaching and curriculum design, and mostly in ESL, and mostly in underserved and minority schools. But then when I look at the school board, it's mostly about the budget. Well, what I've come to understand is that budgets are important because it's an expression of where the priorities are for policy. You can have a great policy, but if it's not funded, it might as well not exist. I don't have any strong recommendations, but I have been thinking about various ways the process could be changed. I think that if the school board would like to have more autonomy, they should also have more accountability. One thing, for example, is that a portion of the CIP, capital improvement program monies that the city manager or city council approves go directly to the school board and let them use that. It wouldn't cost anything more. They would just have direct control over a portion. You could also, I would consider looking at a fixed budget for the school board, and they can ask for an additional appropriation upon request. I'd also consider, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but separate tax bills for the school board, for the school budget and for the operating budget, spring and fall. Another thing, like they do in Biddeford, is the mayor in Biddeford sits on the school board. But this is just the beginning of a conversation, certainly not the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, for you, currently after the school board votes to approve their budget, it must then be approved by city council and then approved by the voters in the citywide election. What are your thoughts on the current school budget process? Would you like to see any changes? And if so, what would they be?
This is a super challenging topic. I'm really happy to say that from what I've witnessed, the relationship between, or the relationship and the collaboration between the school board and the city council has only gotten better since I was first elected. And it really, it's, I think it comes down to collaboration and working with one another. I mean, my first year as a counselor, there was like, respectfully, almost no communication until the budget was like presented to me. And that was pretty jarring. It's slowly gotten better. So I think there's definitely ways to look at how they can collaborate better. The council sets a goal of what they want the tax increase to be every year. The school board is aware of that, and they know where they want the funds to go, because as my friend Zach mentioned, like that's a representation of what they think is important. They can either choose to come in above that number or below that number. And that's where the collaboration comes into. So, I mean, having counselors work more closely with school board, having more consistent joint meetings that are, earlier in the process and more public, I think could really go a long way. I'm a fan of, checks and balances. I do think it is a system of checks and balances where the council has the vision for the budget as a whole in its entirety for the entire city. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of factors that need to be weighed, from people on fixed incomes to people who have lived in Portland their whole lives, had children, no longer do. And people who are struggling to pay rent or their mortgages. So there's so many moving pieces in it that the budget is it's very sensitive and it's incredibly important. So collaboration is huge. You know, at the end of the day, I'm open to certainly any ideas from school board members or you know, individuals who feel strongly about that topic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Zach, this question starts with you. Various people running for charter commission have said they seek more transparency in city government. What does transparency mean to you, and where could the city of Portland be more transparent?
Well, too much gets decided by city staff at this time. When a recommendation is made, it is often made with a political consideration. And there's usually not a range of recommendations made. Councilors are then left sort of trying to parse through what the staff's recommendation and whether to take it or not. But we don't know how the sausage is made, only when it's being delivered on a plate. So the policy directions should be up to our elected officials. One thing that I've been, what else can I say about this? I mean, there's just luck. It's there's a lot of things that the council never even hears about from staff. How the distribution of the home funds, federal home funds, are being allocated. I mean, this is probably the strongest argument for an elected mayor that supervises a city manager or city administrator, but would have to bring any recommendation or any policy process to the council so that it can be hashed out in the public view.
Thank you. Brian, for you, various people running for charter commission have said they seek more transparency in city government. What does transparency mean to you, and where could the city of Portland be more transparent?
Good question. So I would say transparency for me means a couple of things. It means inclusiveness. It means accessibility. It means that the average Portland resident, regardless of creed, color, income, anything, can reasonably understand how our government works, what those processes look like, how decisions are made, and how they have, so they can develop an understanding of how to engage in those processes. It's something that slowly improved when I was a counselor. It was a huge deal when we went to live streaming, even like right there. That was a big move, but there's definitely more we can do. I mean, for the average person, even, you know, I won't name any names, but like talking to friends or even family who live here and, you know, as a counselor, don't quite understand the process of like, oh yeah, you've got this idea that comes forward. Oh, when do we get to show up and talk about it? Well, it actually has to go to a committee. There's actually no formal referral process. It's up to the chair to take it up. And then they're gonna, you know, maybe get a presentation on it. Maybe they'll debate it. And then a couple meetings later, maybe they'll have a public hearing before they refer it to the full council. I mean, it's not the most user-friendly model. And I think there's absolutely ways for us to explore ways to bring more people in to have a better understanding of how the government works, how our government works, because that's how else are we going to be representative of all the voices in the city if all the voices in the city are not being heard.
Thank you. Charlie, for you, various people running for charter commission have said they seek more transparency in city government. What does transparency mean to you, and where could the city of Portland be more transparent?
So I guess to me, transparency is really about accessibility and understanding. I think what I've seen, I think the city is getting better at it, frankly. As terrible as the COVID year has been, a year and a half now, we learned how to leverage technology better. I think our elected officials have done more because they've had to through outreach, through things like Zoom, like we're doing now. I think the charter has opportunities to build and leverage technology to provide better information, quicker information, and more consistent information to the voters, to the constituents of Portland. Whether it's the city news briefs that go out on Fridays now that you can sign up for, or Mayor Snyder's monthly Zoom call, I think those are the path, that's the direction I think that we should be going to create more transparency so that, as Ryan said, people understand what's happening in our government. People can, fill out surveys, they can respond to different types of things happening in the city in a way that they feel included and feels meaningful, and also provides our elected officials with the feedback that they so desperately need to make good decisions for us.
Thank you very much. We're going to have our closing statements now from each of the three candidates, and the order of that will be Brian Batson, and then Charlie Bryon, and then Zack Barowitz. So we're going to start, Brian, with you with a 2-minute closing statement, please.
So this process will have such lasting impacts on our city's future. And it's really important we get open-minded, pragmatic voices on this commission. We need representatives who are patient, who will listen intently, advocate, have the strength to know when they're wrong, and when they're right, the strength to hold their ground on issues. I truly feel that having a member with municipal experiences will go a really long way in this process. And I just sincerely appreciate y'all hosting this. I wish we could have done it in person, but this is a good runner-up. Quick plug: I'm still donating all my proceeds to Milestone. I know times are tough, but if you are able to donate, please. We've raised several $100s. It's a great cause, and I just appreciate all of you tuning in. And thank you to my fellow candidates. It's not easy running for public office, and it takes a lot of bravery sticking your neck out there. And I just know you're seen, and I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Charlie, 2 minutes for your closing statement, please.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody who's on the call tonight, and thank the association for putting this together. I want to thank anybody who's listening that I've spoken to when I've been walking around the streets for being so friendly and so supportive. Even when we didn't disagree on issues, or when we didn't agree on issues, everyone has been amazing. The candidates that I'm running against have been amazing. I think they've got great ideas. I think, frankly, District 3 is very fortunate to have so many, a great lineup of candidates, really. Great experience. I think for me, I'm coming to this with an open mind. I'm looking to learn. I'm looking to hear from the people in District 3. That's what I've been doing when I'm out walking around. I have kids in the local school. I have run a business, and I understand what that means in Portland. I love this city very much, and I really look forward to, if elected, being able to work with the various people and personalities that would be on that commission to find something that the voters will actually approve, that will make our city better. The end part of the Charter Commission should be that we come up with something that people will vote for and move us forward. After a year of deliberation and work, we should have something to show for it at the end that people really are excited about. I think I can help deliver on that.
Thank you. Zack, your opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement, please.
Thanks, John, and thanks to everyone else who's on this call. I've been at this for about 15 years in Portland. It's a frustrating hobby. It takes a lot of patience, but it's rewarding. It's a curious one. I've been building relationships with city staff, some staff for over a decade, because I know that if I need to get something done, I talk to a sort of mid-level staff person, because I know they're going to talk to, and then I talk to my counselor, who will talk to the city manager, who will talk to the department head, who will talk to that mid-level staff person and back up on the line. It's a sort of a crazy process. But when I'm on a call or I'm around town and I hear someone mention the accessory dwelling unit policy, or the Libbytown Garden, or Sundays on the Boulevard, or 140 units of planned affordable and workforce housing, or the planned playground and basketball court, or the community garden at Doherty Field, or the safer sidewalk policy, or even that the driveway at the Dunkin' Donuts does not cross the crosswalk, but the other way around, I can say, I was a part of that. I didn't do it alone, but it might not have happened without me. I'll also mention a lot of work, and Brian expressed the angst on the shelter issue, both at County Way and sticking our necks out for Nason's Corner. But it's a great feeling, and I hope that everyone in Portland has an opportunity to share it.
Thank you very much, Zach. Thanks to everybody who participated in this call, from the neighborhood associations and Friends of Whitford's Corner who put it together, to the three candidates, Brian Batson, Zack Barowitz, and Charlie Bryon, who are here tonight, to our timekeeper, Maya, and sometimes Leah handling in there too. And to, of course, all of you who are out there who will be watching us either tonight or you'll be able to watch it on the YouTube channel of Friends of Woodford's Corner and various other places. Remember to vote either early absentee or on election day, which is on Tuesday, June 8th, coming up in just a few weeks. Once again, thank you all, and we hope to see you on election day. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.